Just ahead on American Black Journal, the nation's first African-American-owned television station is being honored with a special exhibit at the Detroit Historical Museum. We'll talk with the president and executive director of the WGPR-TV 62 Historical Society. Plus, we'll hear about the life, music, and legacy of Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Little Willie John when his two sons join us. That's all coming up next.
Eric wants to know,
what does DTE Energy do to make Michigan a better place?
Rodney can tell you.
We do a lot, like youth education and employment programs. We fund over 500 jobs for youth all across the state. Many are neighborhood improvement projects just like this.
It's incredible.
Wow, that is fantastic. So this is like a paint by number, this whole thing, right? Communities are such great places, aren't they?
They sure are.
I love the siding. Measure once, cut twice, right? DTE Energy. Know your own power.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. As we begin Black History Month, it's fitting that we talk about a major chapter in Detroit's African-American history. The nation's first black-owned television station, WGPR-TV 62, went on the air in Detroit in 1975. Now an exhibit highlighting the station's many contributions is scheduled to open in January 2016 at the Detroit Historical Museum. Here to tell us more are two members of the WGPR-TV 62 Historical Society, President Joe Spencer and Executive Director Karen Hudson Samuels. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you.
Boy, 1975, it's hard to imagine that it was that late or that recent, in fact, that you had the first black-owned TV station on the air.
Well, you know, in 1975, there weren't many black people working in television, period.
Anywhere, right?
Anywhere, you know, on any station. So the whole idea of a black person owning or a black group owning a station was really a new thing back then.
Yeah, and so how did the station get started?
Well, WGPR was owned by a group called the International Masons. They're located here in Detroit. Their world headquarters is here in Detroit. And they already had a radio station, so they were already involved in broadcasting. And Dr. William Vanks, who was the president and supreme master of the International Masons, made application for the license. There was a license that became available because the former Channel 20 was Channel 62, and they had gotten another frequency to go on the air, and so the license was available. And I understand that Dr. Banks and Willie Boykins, who was one of Dr. Banks' lieutenants, had ties to the White House, to the president, to Richard Nixon at that time.
Okay.
And which was back in '72 was when they started the application process. They made the application and they got the application.
And they got it. By air. And talk about those early days then of 1975. You've got a black-owned television station on the air in a majority black city. What was it like now? Of course, I have to confess, I remember a lot of this because I grew up in Detroit, right in the area where the station was. So I can remember all that pretty well.
You know, Stephen, it's interesting. Upon reflection, we've really come to appreciate the significance of the fact that GPR was the first African-American-owned TV station, because for many of us, myself included, the main opportunity was this was our chance to work in television. So I had finished a degree in journalism at Indiana University, was looking for a job, had family here, took an internship, and so what GPR did and what Dr. Banks did with the station was open the opportunity for that first job in television.
Right.
So at the time, we were very excited by the chance. We knew it was the first, but our main objective and goal was to create programs, to be part of the process and learn the skills of being a good broadcaster.
Right, right. And talk about some of the programming that we had on that station.
Well, WGPR, being an independent station, had to produce or buy all of its programs. Didn't have the network affiliations like the other stations in the marketplace. And so we produced a good many programs. I mean, we were going around the clock in terms of production. We had news, 2 newscasts on the day, which had an African-American slant to the news. We had The Scene, which was a very popular dance show at that time. We had talk shows on. We had a show called The Morning Party, which was kind of like the Today Show, you know, where you had live guests and music entertainment and that kind of thing. Karen used to, in fact, was one of our news anchors as well as the news director, but she also hosted a show called the Historical Black Films.
Black Film Showcase.
Showcase, and we featured black films from the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. And so we just had just a wide variety of programming, including some foreign language programs. I mean, we had Arab programming on, Polish programming on, religious programming on. So we really had quite a bit of locally produced programs. We produced more local programming than any other station in the market.
That's what I remember about it.
And the range was fascinating. We've come across, as we've undertaken the research in preparation for the exhibit at the Historical Museum that ultimately will be moved to the studios of the station on Jefferson. We've come across pictures of wrestling matches that were held in the studio live. So, to Joe's point, the range of programming was amazing, was just amazing. And because it was independent and the necessity to be creative and innovative was something that played itself out with Team Profile, speaking of sports, all kinds of different, Detroit Crime Alert, all kind of community-based programming, and that was part of the legacy and dream of Dr. Banks.
Right. So I have a confession that you mentioned it briefly, that the scene was the state. I think that's the program that if you grew up here in the 70s and 80s, you would remember the most on WGPR. But I was on the scene.
Were you on the scene?
I was, which is a great bit of trivia, mostly because anyone who knows me will tell you I don't dance.
Well, you didn't have to. It's just a party.
I wasn't a good dancer,
time.
but I went on the show and all my friends watched, and somewhere in my mother's basement there's a videotape of it. So.
Well, we have videotapes too, Stephen. We're going through
we can go find it.
And so
you have the tape?
I have the tape somewhere in my mother's house. This was Valentine's Day, 1986. So I'll have to ask her. I don't know if I want that out there. That's right. I may have to keep it in the basement.
Big afro?
I did not have a big afro, but I wore a scarf and a hat and danced around it. I did my thing, It was like everybody on the scene.
It was a place to be for young people at that time.
It really was.
They would line up and wait and come home from school or whatever, and that was the place to be seen.
You watched it every day,
every day.
And the great thing about the scene, I always felt, was it wasn't, it was black kids, white kids, everybody watched the scene. And if you say that to anybody who grew up in this community at that time, they know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, that's the interesting thing about the station. Although it was a black-owned station, it gave access to everybody. Everybody, young, old, black, white, religion, just everybody. So that made it a unique operation for television, for broadcasting. Interesting enough, one of your guests tonight was one of the members of the scene's production crew and danced on it. Keith John.
Yes. Keith John was.
Yes, he was a part. I know him from back when he was just a little chicken, little baby chicken. But the station did give access to everybody.
To a lot of people, and it gave a lot of African American journalists that people would know their start, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it gave them opportunities that other stations wouldn't at the time.
We did a kind of an inventory of even in the local stations. So from WDT, where we are now, to Fox, to WDIV, XYZ, every every has had and currently has WGPR alumni.
Alumni, right.
And so that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
The fact that many of them probably would not have had that first opportunity.
They wouldn't have got a shot.
The other stations did not give them the opportunity unless they came with experience.
And that's a good reminder of, 1975 is not that long ago, and I want to make sure that we say that because I was alive then. It's not that long ago, but the difference in terms of opportunity for African American broadcasters was phenomenal. I mean, there's no comparison between now and then. And I think people tend to forget that a little bit.
And some of the other interesting things about the station, the station was the first station in this market to go 24 hours.
That's right. It didn't go off at 2 or 3 a.m.
Right. First station in the marketplace to use electronic news gathering, in the field. Everybody else was using 16mm film. WGPR was using videotape as in the field. So, we did some innovative things as well. Yeah.
Right. So the exhibit will be at the Historical Museum, but you plan to move all of that down to the East Jefferson studio, which is sitting empty right now?
Well, it's still intact. It's
Okay.
Everything is still there.
Everything's still there.
Yeah, well, not all of the original equipment,
Right.
but everything else is there. And you know, of course, the radio studios are still
The radio
there.
is still
Yes,
there,
right,
right?
exactly.
And so that'll become a permanent
exhibit.
museum.
Permanent, and we want to make it a living exhibit space. So we want the nature of the museum experience to be kind of dynamic and fun with some interaction. We want people to be able to come in and see not only the programs and the stories of the pioneers, but to also participate in a bit of a little production.
In the things.
So
yeah.
here's
so you're
something.
going to have the scene set in there. I can go back and relive.
We'll have to see with the popularity. One of the things that's important to get the community's input as well. What would they like to see?
Right.
We know what we think is historically significant to see, and we know we're going to have something with the scene as a component. That you just can't overlook that.
Yeah, right. And you gotta have some sort of tribute to Nat Morris, right? You say that name,
That's
even
right.
today, everybody knows that was the host of the scene.
Well,
right?
Nat is a board member of the
Oh, he is?
society.
Okay,
Yes,
very
he's
good.
actively
Right,
involved.
right.
He has
Very involved.
hundreds of tapes from the shows. So
Yeah.
yes, he would definitely be
Yeah.
part of what we're doing.
All right, and this all gets going in 2016, but you guys are raising money now to get it up and running, right?
Right. Our debut fundraiser is February 21st. Starting at 6:30 at the Detroit Historical Museum in the streets of Old Detroit. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have video snippets from different programs. We'll also have President Gerald Ford sent a congratulatory message to the station
When it
when it went on the air. So
Very
we're
good.
saving that and other kind of surprises for that evening. So
Yeah.
people really have to come out and understand why it's historically important
Why
to
it's important.
preserve the story, have a good time, and it's really our debut fundraiser. So we are very much interested in getting the whole community
People to
involved
come out and
come out.
support that.
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, great
Absolutely.
to have you guys here, and good luck, best of luck with the
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
with the
Thank you.
endeavor. Just ahead on American Black Journal, a history lesson on the Detroit musician who had a major influence on singers like Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye. We'll talk with the two sons of Little Willie John right after this look at some important moments in Detroit's Black history.
I'm Ken Coleman with a look back at African American life in Detroit. This week in 1894, Charles Coles Diggs Sr. was born in Mississippi. He became a leading businessman and the first African American Democrat elected to the Michigan Senate. In 1967, Jimmy Mack by Martha Reeves and the Vandellas was released on Motown Records' Gordy label. The song became a top 10 hit on the pop and R&B charts. And in 1994, the Detroit Pistons retired Vinnie Johnson's number 15 jersey during a ceremony at the Palace of Auburn Hills. These are significant events this week in Detroit's Black history, taken from the book On This Day, African American Life in Detroit.
Fans of early soul music know the name of Little Willie John. The charismatic singer lived in Detroit, and his music influenced many famous singers who followed in his footsteps. John was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996 in a ceremony led by Stevie Wonder. A book about Little Willie John was co-authored by his son, Kevin, and Detroit News music journalist Susan Whitehall. Its title, Fever, is named after one of John's first recordings. Taking now are Little Willie John's two sons, Kevin and Keith John. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you, sir.
I don't think anybody can hear that song and not know what it is, but also, and the thing about your father that I think is so distinct, it's the voice, the emotion that's conveyed in that voice, and there's almost a haunting quality to it that's just unmistakable.
Absolutely, and he recorded that song when he was only about 18 years old.
Is that
so
right?
He had a very mature voice
Right.
at a very young age.
Right. So tell me about, and that's one of the most recorded songs. There's lots of other people who have picked up on it and done their own version.
Yeah, absolutely. But the sad part for us is that many people have recorded it, but most people don't know who did it first.
They don't know who did it, and he wrote that song.
Well, no,
correct?
he didn't
not
write it, but he was the first artist to record it.
To record it.
Exactly.
I see.
Let's just say
Exactly.
he put his fingerprint
He
on
put
it.
his mark
Because
on it. Yeah.
The way that we understand is that the song was written kind of one way, and he said, on my terms, I want to do this so that I can feel it. Because he
Right.
wasn't a big fan of it until he did it. Then once he did it, he put his fingerprint in it. And then everybody that heard it from that point, they got to hear his version.
Right.
So they're like, okay, well, this is, so melodies and things like that were, let's just say very highly influenced by
Right.
his creative energy.
Right.
And in fact, today, with the way the music industry is today, he might have even gotten writer's credits because he changed the song so much to make it
That
what
they
you hear
would
today.
have credited him because it was so different from the original. But of course, this is at a time when all of those kind of things were nebulous, and especially for African American artists, right?
Absolutely. Remember, we're talking about before Motown.
Before Motown.
Many people don't recognize that. They don't recognize that there was a very vibrant music scene here in Detroit before Motown.
Right. And so tell me about his career. How did he come to be the singer here in Detroit?
Well, he kind of grew up in the church, and he sang with his brothers and sisters years ago, before coming into being a professional singer. But then at about a very young age, he decided he was going to go to New York and he was going to get a record deal. And he went to New York and he got a record deal. I mean, it's simple. It's
He just went to New York and got a record deal.
Absolutely. He went and he was in different studios. He was kind of a prankster. He would go out and he kind of left the hotel where he wasn't. We talk about that in the book. He went out and he was recording in the studio, I think, later that evening.
But how common was? I mean, that's not everyone's story. Everyone says, "I want to be a singer. I'm going to go sign a record deal." But that's not.
I guess it helps. It probably helps when you have the gift to back it up.
Well, sure.
He had the goods.
He could sing. Right.
Yeah. And we listened to a lot of the people from his day that would tell you a lot of wonderful, heartwarming stories about him and his gift. He could just open up and just let it go.
Yeah.
And if we think about the music scene today, it's so drastically different. Now they talk about auto-tune. He was his own auto-tune. He had a great ear.
It's not
He's
a
like,
computer.
I'm just going to open up and let this go. And
Right.
with all that emotion, and he was so young, but you didn't hear youth in his voice. You heard.
There's a
it sounded like it felt like maturity, and you heard it. It felt like experience, like
Absolutely.
19-year-old singing about fever. You
Right.
get the fever. I mean,
What does he know about that?
Yeah.
And even before recording his own record, he was singing with people like Count Basie. So he loved a wide range of music, not just any one type of music. So he had been singing since he was really young.
I say that all the time, that for people who really appreciate music, and for most musicians, there are only two kinds of music. There's good music and there's bad music, and all of the other sort of categories we come up with don't really mean anything. I mean, if you really are a musician, you can do it under any genre that exists. And he really was a testament to that. Right?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, Levi Stubbs and Sam Moore of Sam and Dave even said years ago, he said that he had the kind of talent that he could sing the songbook and make it interesting.
Right.
I mean, not the songbook, but the yellow pages.
The
yellow pages. And make it interesting.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
So tell me about writing the book.
Well,
that's got to have been not just the professional experience, but the personal. I mean, this is your story.
Absolutely.
As much as anything else.
Exactly. Well, it couldn't have happened first without my mom. When we had the idea to do it, we went to Mom and said, "We got to get you to sign off on that." And once we did that, we had a wonderful experience with Susan Whitehall. She's a fabulous writer.
Yeah.
But we kind of met, kind of strange. We were at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and we bumped into each other. And I said, no one has ever done a book on my dad. And she was surprised.
Yeah.
And so I said, what do you think about that idea? So fast forward, some months or years later, she wrote a story and included my dad. And I thanked her, and I said, no one has written a book about my dad. What do you think about that? So, we got together with her. We talked about the idea of doing it, and 5+ years later, it was done.
How hard was it to piece together that story? I mean, this is, like you said, before Motown. This is at a very different time in the music industry in terms of just keeping records, I would think. How hard was it to piece all that together?
Well,
we got
lots of interviews.
Feedback. Yeah, lots of memories, and then too, a lot of he did a lot of interviews with a lot of my dad's friends, old friends, bandmates,
who are still around.
Yeah, and then I was in some circls where I remember I was in New York doing the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and we got B.B. King and we got Jeffrey Osborne, we got George Benson. I was in L.A. and I talked to him, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to," because they all loved him. So they said, "Well, I'll talk about him. I don't do a lot of interviews, but I'll talk about this or I'll talk about that regarding him," because they loved him.
And in fact,
he inspired them.
An interesting story too, Stephen, is that George Benson was in New Zealand about to do a concert.
Right.
He called me from New Zealand and said, "Hey, man, I've only got a few minutes, before the show starts, but I want to, you want to talk? I want to talk about about your dad." So people really loved him.
Yeah.
They really loved what
well,
he was doing.
and what's interesting about that is that if you say that name, in Detroit, where he lived, most people wouldn't know who you're talking about.
And that's
and
the
why,
sad
why
part.
is that? Why is
Well,
that true?
because he died. Well, first he was incarcerated.
Right, and that's another part of the story,
Exactly.
right?
But he died so young. He died before the media thing. In fact, he has the distinction of being the only Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee that doesn't have any video footage in the presentation.
Is that right?
So he died just before all that push for videos weren't done. So people, if they don't see it, especially in this visual age that we live today, if they don't see it, they don't recognize it. They don't exactly.
Right.
But you ask those people, like the Stevie Wonders, the George Bensons, the Jeffrey Osbornes, the Gladys Knights, because Susan and I had a chance to interview a lot of people.
Yeah.
And they had some really, really great stories.
It's so interesting because if you think about all the people he did get to interview, it's probably as many people that he didn't get to interview.
Absolutely.
I remember I spoke to Aaron Neville, and when I mentioned my dad's name, his eyes just lit up. He said, I want to be included. And they had so many people that wanted to talk about it that by the time we got to Aaron Neville, his phone number had changed.
Oh, is that
So,
right?
it was, I mean, it was a process, but and the way that New Zealand thing happened is a friend of mine said, I'm going to see George Benson tonight. He hit me on Facebook and said, I'm going to see George Benson tonight. I said, I need to speak to him. Can you let him know, tell him that Keith asked him to call us and give him this number. So he helped us make the connection at that point, because I saw George, I think I saw him after. When I saw him in LA, that was after that. But, and then George just called. He just called and said, look, I want to talk about it. And so, And those were the good things that a lot of the people that we went to try to get a little bit of assistance, you know. And then with Stevie, I was on the road. What country were we in? I don't know. We were performing somewhere, and I said, okay, Steve, because he had expressed to me that he wanted to be a part of it, and so I said, okay, I got to corner him. So I said, I'm gonna have my recorder and everything ready. I said, Steve, I need you tonight. I need you to do this little thing for the forward for the book. And he said, okay, cool. And then I didn't realize he had 2 or 3 interviews he had to do before he got to me. And then at the end of that, he said, Keith, let's do it. And so we did it.
So he got it.
Yeah, because he really wanted to be. He didn't want that opportunity to
you know, I'm curious, you do this kind of book a lot, and like I said, it's your story as much as anything else. How much of what you could remember about your dad is reflected in the book?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. Susan talked to my uncles and aunts and stuff, the ones that are still around. But she interviewed myself and my brother and my mom.
Yeah.
So a lot of good history from things that we didn't remember until we started talking about.
So you started talking
things
about it, right?
even things about my mom and dad when they were dating, and
how they met.
Yeah, how they met at the Apollo Theater in New York, and so it was great. But the reason that when he said earlier that we had, my mom had to sign off, is because we knew it would be a certain amount of emotional attachment to him and his story.
Sure.
And so we wanted to make sure we had her blessing. We wanted to make sure she would be comfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you don't want to.
Because
and
actually,
not appropriate.
Exactly.
Right.
Because actually, I had this dream more than 20 years ago. But my mom wasn't
to do the book,
yes,
right?
But she was not ready for it, and it probably wasn't a good time then. But we could have talked to a lot more people then, because they were still around.
Right. Well, that's the thing. If you wait,
absolutely.
You know, people
Absolutely.
go away. The incarceration at the end of your dad's life, and he died in prison.
Yes.
Do you feel like that sort of helps? Is one of the things that made him less well known too?
Absolutely, because he was like on a hiatus. You couldn't see him, you couldn't hear him.
Right.
But in 1966, he did his last recordings, and most people have never even heard them. They were done for Capitol Records, and they were just released in 2008.
Is that right?
By a company actually in the UK. In the UK, they love my dad's music. It's still alive today.
Oh yeah.
It's alive and well.
Yeah.
Right.
But their concept on music there is so different from ours here.
Sure.
I mean, in this country, we tend to be a little more the latest great thing, and our loyalty is not as strong. But they're like music historians.
Sure.
They go back for the old stuff. They don't care as long as they say this is good music.
Right.
They cling to it.
And blues is such a big deal.
Yeah. And another thing, my brother's been talking about.
We've got a wrap here.
Okay. He's been talking about trying to get on Unsung. They talk about unsung heroes.
Right.
I mean, all the people that he touched.
Yeah. No.
It's like,
Well, it's great that,
unbelievable.
It's great that you guys are here to keep that story
Thank you,
alive.
Steve.
And thank you for being here on the show.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time on American Black Journal.
Eric wants to know.
What does DTE Energy do to make Michigan a better place?
Rodney can tell you.
We do a lot, like youth education and employment programs. We fund over 500 jobs for youth all across the state. Many are neighborhood improvement projects just like this.
It's incredible.
Wow, that is fantastic. So this is like a paint by number, this whole thing, right? Communities are such great places, aren't they?
They sure are.
I love the siding. Measure once, cut twice, right? DTE Energy. Know your own power.